Hello, it's me, Dick Jr. again. Come to you today. I'm going to read you Matthew chapter 13. I've already prayed. I suggest you do the same whenever you place yourself in God's Word. He'll help you to understand it, So I made a few references here. There's 5 of them. I'm going to go over them real quick. You can write them down if you got a piece of paper. So here is the first reference, Deuteronomy 29, 4. That's chapter 29, verse 4 of Deuteronomy. Isaiah chapter 29, verse 10. That's chapter 29, verse 10 of Isaiah. Romans chapter 11, verse 8. That's Romans chapter 11, verse 8. Revelation chapter 14, verse 14 through 19. That's chapter 14, verses 14 through 19 of Revelation. And Matthew chapter 11, verse 6. That's chapter 11, verse 6 of Matthew. So there's 5 of them. Some of them are ones that I made myself through other references in here, and some of them are theirs. Anyway, these are the ones that I just am going to touch on real quick. There are so many more wonderful references in this book. So, and it's quite long too. So, and there's a lot here. So let's get started. That day, Jesus went out of the house and was sitting by the sea, and often Jesus would go off alone for a while to pray and to meditate to himself, because he was always surrounded by so many people. And large crowds gathered to him, so that he got into a boat and sat down, and the whole crowd was standing on the beach. Now, it was because he was being crowded into the water, and also so that once he was on the boat, he could talk to more people, and they could hear him better, because he was a little higher up and had the water between him and them, and nobody to stifle off the sound, so more folks could hear him. And he spoke many things to them in parables, saying, Behold, the sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seeds fell beside the road, and the birds came and ate them up. Others fell on the rocky places where they did not have much soil. And immediately they sprang up, because they had no depth of soil. But when the sun had risen, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. Others fell among the thorns, and the thorns came up and choked them out. And others fell on the good soil and yielded a crop, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear. And I'm going to pause right there. He who has ears, let him hear. And every time that we hear Jesus say this, it's a good idea that we try to pause and figure out what he's saying. I'm not going to explain this parable right now, because Jesus goes on to explain it in this chapter, and I don't think I can explain it any better than Jesus explains it himself. So, verse 10. And the disciples came and said to him, Why do you speak to them in parables? And Jesus answered to them, To you it has been granted to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been granted. And that means also to you, if you understand and believe that Jesus is the Son of God. If you believe Jesus is the Son of God, then it's been granted to you as well. For whoever has, to him more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But to whoever does not have, even what he has shall be taken away from him. And this is not speaking of material things, I don't think, or strictly of material things. This is speaking of spiritual things. So, like, to he who does believe in God, more belief and more gifts according to God will be given to him, right? You see where I'm at with that whole line? And I'm not talking about just monetary faith, okay? But whoever does not have, even what he has shall be taken away. So, like, if you didn't have that belief, then, it's possible that joy and many other things could be taken away from you. So let's go to verse 13. Therefore I speak to them in parables, because while seeing they do not see, and while hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. This is one of the verses where I'm going to go take the references. We're going to use 3 references here. We're going to use Deuteronomy 29:4, Isaiah 29:10, and Romans 11:18 at this point. So if you want to pause and come back, you can. All right, so the first one that I'm going to go to is, and it's very important, the reason why I'm doing it in this this kind of manner here. But Deuteronomy 29, verse 4 says, "Yet to this day the Lord has not given you a heart to know, nor eyes to see, nor ears to hear." And what this is saying is that God is the one who grants the ability to hear, know, see these things here. See what I mean? So if you're not able to see and know and hear, then God hasn't granted it to you. But if you pray and ask him, if you diligently seek him, he'll give it to you. But that's beside the point. What I want to say about this verse is the first 4 words of this verse says, "Yet to this day." To what day? This day. And it was true back then, it's true today, yet to this day, God does this very same thing. He places a spirit upon people. And it says, "To this day, the Lord has not given you a heart to know, nor eyes to see, nor ears to hear." So we can't hold it against folks if they don't understand things of the Spirit concerning the Bible, because God hasn't given it to them to understand yet. He will when his own time is. You see what I mean? So then the next one is Isaiah 29:10. I got it marked. 29:10. This is just the first part of 29:10, but it says, "For the Lord has poured over you a spirit of deep sleep. He has shut your eyes," the prophets. So here, I made this reference myself, but here the Lord has poured a spirit of deep sleep, which is not like actual sleeping slumber. It's a sleep, a stupor, and obviously he's shutting the eyes of people or someone, in this case, the prophets. So in that case, the prophets. So I'm going to go back to where we were at, and the next one is Romans 11:18, and you'll see this one is fairly straightforward. But just as it is written, God gave them a spirit of stupor, which takes us back to what I was just talking about. Okay, and then it says, eyes to see not, and ears to hear not, down to this day. And that references, and it's written in here, Deuteronomy 29:4. So then if you go back to Deuteronomy 29:4, which we just read, Matthew references that. Or actually, what it is Jesus references that. And the point that I was going to make with that as well, not just that it's used again here, is that Jesus used that verse and knew that verse, and Jesus' disciples used and knew this verse because they used it here in Romans. Okay, so it's probably a good idea for us also to understand, use, and know this verse as well. So, let's see, we are in Matthew 13. I got bookmarks and everything except the big one. I let it flip out. But, so 13. Verse 14. In their case, the prophecy of Isaiah is being fulfilled, which says, "You will keep on hearing, but will not understand. You will keep on seeing, but will not perceive." That's Isaiah chapter 6, verse 9, if you want to follow it. "For the heart of this people has become dull. With their eyes they with their ears they scarcely hear, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise they would see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and return, and I would heal them." And right there, that says everything. If they would just turn, God would heal them. "But blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear." And he's talking about you and me right now, because we see and hear him in the Word and in the world. Verse 17. "For truly I say to you that many prophets and righteous men desire to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it." And the deeper your perception of God becomes, the more that you're able to see, and the more this becomes true. And it's very true for many of these people here at this time, because they actually saw Jesus healing. They saw Jesus crucified. They saw all these things that he did and all the things that happened. Anyway, I'm going to go on because we need to read on through. Verse 18, "Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom," and this is now Jesus explaining the parable I read earlier about sowing the seed and the birds and the thorns and the thistles coming up and the good soil and the bad soil. Okay, now he's going to explain it to them. because it's been granted to them. You see what I mean? So now today it's granted to you as well, and to me, to understand this parable, because Jesus said it was granted, and now he's explaining it. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. Okay, so hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in his heart. This is the one on whom the seed was sown beside the road. The one on whom the seed was sown on the rocky places, this is the man who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet he has no firm root in himself, but is only temporary. And when affliction or persecution arises because of the word, immediately he falls away. Okay, the next verse. And the one on whom the seed was sown among the thorns, this is the man who hears the word, and the worry of the world and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful. And I circled that whole verse, underlined a large portion of it, but I circled again inside there, deceitfulness of wealth, because the pursuit of wealth or the love of wealth both can pull you away from God and become a problem. And that's why it's mentioned. Verse 23. And the one on whom seed was sown on the good soil, this is the man who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and brings forth some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. Jesus presented another parable to them, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to the man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went away. But when the wheat sprouted and bore grain, then the tares became evident also. The slaves of the landowner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? And he said to them, An enemy has done this. The slaves said to him, Do you want us then to go gather them up? But he said, No, for while you are gathering up the tares, you may uproot the wheat with them. Allow them both to grow together until the harvest, and in the time of the harvest I will say to the reapers, First gather up the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. I'm going to pause right here because I want to explain a little bit about wheats and tares so you can understand a little bit better about this whole thing. Okay, so when they used to sow seed back in this day, they weren't in rows or, it was all over. And it looks very much like a wheat field nowadays. It's just wheat, okay? And so when wheats and tares first come up, they look very similar and sprout very close to the same amount of time. And, it's very hard to tell them apart. And they grow the same and they grow up. And then when the wheat and the tares, the wheat gets its heads on it, they look very different. But they're not fully developed. They're still developing those heads of wheat, at first. So if you go in and you start pulling them out, then for every tare that you pull out, even though you can see it, you may lose some of the wheat, right? Okay, so Jesus says right here to leave them in there, to leave them in the tares with the wheat. The reason is because when wheat becomes ripe and ready to pick, the grains on that tip become so heavy that the wheat will bend over, okay? But the tares will stand straight up. So now the slaves can just walk along, snatch the tares, and pull them out. You see what I mean? Wrap them up, burn them. Then come back and bring in the wheat. So that's why this is told the way it's told. But I was always told that that's compared to bowing our heads in prayer, bowing our heads in submission to the Lord. That's the difference between a wheat and a tare. So verse 31, he presented another parable to them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field. And this is smaller than all other seeds, but when it is full grown, it is larger than the garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and nest in its branches. He spoke another parable to them. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 pecks of flour until it was all leavened. All these things Jesus spoke to the crowds in parables, and he did not speak to them without a parable. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the foundation of the world. Then he left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples came to him and said, Explain to us the parable of the tares of the field. And he said, The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. And as for the good seed, these are the sons of the kingdom. And the tares are the sons of the evil one. And the enemy who sowed them is the devil. And the harvest is the end of the age. And the reapers are the angels. And I'm going to pause here again. I'm going to go ahead and take the reference to Revelation 14 through 19. Really quick here. He was talking about the end and the angels coming to reap. So verse 14 says, Then I looked at a white cloud, and sitting on the cloud was one like a son of man, having a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. And another angel came out of the temple, crying out with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, Put in your sickle and reap, for the hour to reap has come, because the harvest of the earth is ripe. Then he who sat on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple, which is in heaven, the sickle. Then another angel, the one who has power over fire, came out from the altar, and he called with a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, saying, Put in your sharp sickle and gather the clusters from the vine of the earth, because her grapes are ripe. So the angel swung his sickle to the earth and gathered the clusters from the vine of the earth and threw them into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And that's a little bit more than what we needed right there, but I just wanted you to understand that there's a reaping of wheat, there's a reaping of clusters of grapes at the end, but the reaping is done by angels, and that's why I made the reference. Verse 40. So just as the tares are gathered up and burned with fire, so shall it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send forth his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all the stumbling blocks and those who commit lawlessness, and will throw them into the furnace of fire. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear. And again, he says this, so we need to learn the things that he's talking about here. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and hid again. And from joy over it, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking fine pearls. And upon finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet cast into the sea and gathering fish of every kind. And when it was filled, they drew it up on the beach, and they sat down and gathered the good fish into containers, but the bad they threw away. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come forth and take out the wicked from among the righteous, and will throw them into the furnace of fire. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is all the words of Jesus, by the way, folks. This is nobody else. This is all the words of Jesus. Okay? Verse 51. Have you understood all these things? They said to him, Yes. And Jesus said to them, Therefore every scribe who has become a disciple of the kingdom of heaven is like a head of the household who brings out of his treasure things new and old. Excuse me. When Jesus had finished these parables, he departed from there. He came to his hometown and began teaching them in their synagogues, so that they were astonished and said, Where did this man get this wisdom and these miracles, these miraculous powers? Is this not the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brothers James and Joseph and Simon and Judas and his sisters? Are they not all with us? Where then did this man get all these things? And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and in his own household. And he did not do many miracles there because of their unbelief. And I'm going to back it up just a little bit to verse 57, where it says, and they took offense at him. And my Bible references Matthew chapter 11, verse 6. And if you were with me before, I read this to you. But it says, and I may have even touched on it, but it said, and blessed is he who does not take offense at me. And this is what Jesus tells John the Baptist's disciples when they come to ask Jesus if he's the one they're looking for. And this is the last thing that he says to him in this verses here. And blessed is he who does not take offense at me. So anyways, I just wanted to make a reference to that concerning verse 57 in Matthew chapter 13. So that's it. And thank you for listening, and God bless.